Game 81, Crystal Palace versus West Ham on the 21st of April 2024, titled Any Old Irons. Another Saturday and another journey into London on the train. Busy train, gyrating groins at eye level by Wickham, and an hour and 20 minutes of thinking. Over the years I have been surrounded occasionally by West Ham fans, and to this very day I am still surrounded by them. Executive producer Tom, he's so Irons, he's rusty, and my brother-in-law and his son are Irons fans too. Now, knowing my love for Oxford United, my local side, I get the emotional tie. But it will always be difficult when looking at an emotive fan of another club, cussing and swearing more often than not about their club, whilst thinking, hold on a bit, it's only football. We as supporters or fans do get lost in the moment. Whether it's achievement or in defeat, the rationale goes out of the window, and that often makes it funny for others. Seeing someone in complete denial or meltdown and thinking, I don't get like that. But I can remember coming out of the Manor ground on a slate grey day with rain hosing down after an abject performance and saying to a policeman, you shouldn't be nicking us, meaning the nice football fan of the 80s, but doing them, i.e. Oxford United, for fraud, as that wasn't what I paid to see. Anyway, it can be blinding when you have a passion for a club. We had been out for a meal and a drink with my brother-in-law and his wife the previous night, and invariably the chat turned to West Ham and my match on Saturday, and their manager's position, which had been coming into question in recent weeks. Add into the fact that he had delivered a European trophy for the first time in 58 years, just 11 months prior. He chatted, I listened, and then the thought of executive producer Tommy's roller coaster of quotes in and around the studio when we are at TalkSport. The manager's position was definitely bringing a divide from the Irons fans that I knew. On the journey in, I'm trying to look at where this argument lies. So I try without pen and paper to mentally look at the advantages and disadvantages. Primarily, the fans were not too impressed with the overall style of play and transfer windows. Throw against that their position and achievements under him. West Ham fans, like many others, would like to 1. Dine at the top table in the Premier League, and 2. Compete with the big clubs on signings. No fan wants to accept or hear another club in the same division is more appetising prospect than your own. There are haves and have-nots in every division, and the Premier League is no different. Even in the EFL, if you have 10,000 fans, you are going to be a better prospect for a player than a side who regularly get 3,000. Okay, sirrah. Is it actually about the current incumbent having been there too long now and the players need to hear a different voice, or maybe a case of being careful what you wish for? I decide that today's match, where the Irons head to the Eagles, I will observe, commentate and draw my own conclusions as an impartial person. Palace being at home means London Bridge is actually busier than normal, and that means barriers are up and redirecting of passengers will ensue before and after 5 p.m. Why do I mention it? Well, it means old chocolate hobbly guy needs to walk even further, for fuck's sake. Once I arrive at the studio, I chat with executive producer Tom about his side's prospects. Whilst Tom is extremely quick-thinking and sharp-witted, his love for West Ham does, more often than not, end up being a leveller, as he is reduced to outbursts of support and anger in equal measure. And it's more anger presently. He falls between he has won us a European trophy and the football is shit cleft stick. He isn't looking forward to this afternoon's game as Glasnow's Eagles are playing well. But this is, to all intents and purposes, Palace, and not Arsenal, Chelsea or Spurs away game. As he descends into, I don't want to talk about it territory, he then goes off and busies himself with other things. Such is the malaise of a football supporter. Emotions, hopes, expectations or not, if the case may be, fucks us up. Chat and banter between commentator ensues before team news, mic checks and comfort breaks are dealt with before going live at 5 to 3. Now, I cannot lie, after 45 minutes I did draw my own conclusion on the West Ham performance and the present incumbent. Oh, the Irons were shocking. I certainly cannot recall such an abysmal performance from a side who could be so much better. It was 4-1 to Palace at the break. Antonio had pulled one back after falling 4 goals behind. It was an abject defensive display without taking anything away from Palace, who dismantled West Ham. Elise, Eze and an own goal and then Mateta scoring. But it must have been so galling for those travelling fans to witness. As a fan or supporter, shit happens. You have those days, but for those diehards, this was going to be the straw that moved some fans off of the fence. It was almost signalling the end of a reign. For me, there was more of a story here. Yes, the second half was effectively a 1-1 draw with a 5-2 defeat for the Irons. But for David Moyes and his position, it had a feel of him being undermined. Whether it was a knowing undermining or not, I don't know. It is April. Did West Ham's hierarchy not spending in the January transfer window say, we'll save our transfer kitty for a new manager? Or maybe the right players were not available at the right price? Or had the main man himself taken a rain check in terms of the contract offer and thought, no, maybe I should walk away with my head held high with a European trophy under my belt and my stock high as investment over the next few years could affect my career. Whatever discussions that had taken place or not in the background, I will never know. But as per usual, the smoke and mirrors always left supporters with much to ponder. David Moyes, to me, has been around for a long time and he knows the footballing intricacies better than most and was successful at Everton and West Ham whilst being handed the unenviable task of following Sir Alex at United in between. But to me, this performance did smack of the end is nigh. The West Ham Academy that everyone of a certain age remembers, and with the likes of Moore, Peters and Hurst, is no longer relevant in this cash-laden Premier League, and sides with history and the stature of West Ham sit just outside the fictional Big Six. Wealth and investment seems to influence more and more in the game at the top level, and as I've remarked before, Newcastle still haven't won a trophy, but their backing means they are now playing player poker at the top table. I wrapped up and headed on my journey across the capital. It's busy, and when emerging from the underground at Marylebone, agreed to take the train to Birmingham, calling at Bicester North. I exit the station and get in my chauffeured limousine, complete with Rocco in the boot of the hatchback. The nights are light and the chat sporadic due to my train-imposed silence on the way home. I'm grilled over next week's workload. I have 2 in London on Wednesday, before 1 on Thursday, 1 on Friday, and back in London at TalkSport on Saturday. Ships that pass in the night, my wife says. I think, yeah. She glides through the seas of life like a stunning clipper cutting through the waves. And me, I am the shit she passes in the night. Game 82, Ulsan versus Yokohama on the 24th of April 2024. Titled, What Do You Want? It is a 2-game Wednesday and an early start for the drive into West London. I have booked my parking for both games. Today's early morning game drive is filled with the thoughts of a chat with Marco, the cameraman, on Sunday. I had contacted him as I know he listens to the podcast and therefore was concerned that I'd maybe erred away from football and getting a little dark with my podcast. Podcast? More of an autobiography of musings and life in general at times. I'd also spoken to my older brother for a while on Sunday morning. This was after not speaking very regularly in recent weeks. It is safe to say that other things surrounding my life have been tough, and they still are. But not as tough as it is for others, but then tougher than others, if you know what I mean. So, there has been a mental downside to my look at life, and I was concerned about how it was being perceived. After the chat with my brother and before my conversation with Marco, it was fairly obvious to me that I could be turning people off. My brother was worried when I read an unpublished match day precursor, and so too was my wife. It had been written a while and my own editorial thoughts on it wasn't for public consumption. But Marco was a listener. He was also educated and objective. He posed a lot of questions to me, a fair few I couldn't answer. The main one was, what do you want from this? It sounds simple, but I didn't know. What do I do it for? Why do I do it? What am I expecting? It was a powerful and incredibly, and for me, thought-provoking set of questions. I travelled into West London asking myself, why? Why am I doing it? Who is it for? What am I expecting from it? It fills my all too easily distracted mind. I honestly thought I could write something vaguely interesting and amusing, but then realised I couldn't actually write with the correct grammar and punctuation, so I went for audio. Maybe a part of me thought I was interesting. But it wasn't about that really, so who is it for? Again, I don't really know. Some depressives out there might listen and think there's somebody more mentally crazier than me, or maybe some prospective psychoanalyst could use it as a textbook. Expectations? I never had any. Marco said if you're looking for a book deal, you may need to change things. Book deal, Marco, please! Never a thought. So in that case, what do you want? It was then I needed to understand. It was then the insurmountable question tied up my mind with a question I'd never really posed myself. It troubled me and to a degree frightened me as to exactly why. I arrived on my booked parking space in West London in plenty of time. I wandered a short walk down to the doors of inexplicable difficulty and made my way in to be greeted by Brenners. I wanted to ask Brenners about my mindful conundrum, but felt in a way it might sound as though I was being a bit needy. I suppose I'm not made of stone or iron where things will bounce off me. I'm made of plasticine and every knock leaves an indentation. The determination of what is a life knock and what shouldn't be is left to my unhinged mental state. I maybe lived my life a little like a chess match. You know what I mean. If I move there, then they will move there. Then I will go there before they go there. And I'm always trying to negotiate a safe passage without risking too much. So therefore, maybe not speaking to Brenners without seeming needy is the right way forward. It's all about confidence. Some have it, some don't. I think by now I've explained how ridicule in the past has removed that trait from me. I do wonder if people are surprised by that, as many think I'm arrogant and confident. No, far from it. It's all an illusion, or act. But maybe I'll return to that sometime later. It is the AFC Champions League semi-final second leg action today in a finely poised game between Yokohama of Japan, part of the City group of teams, and Ulsan of Korea, who lead by 1 goal after the first leg. It is a fine game with just about everything you could want. Let's take the weather. It's torrential rain for the game. This allows for mistakes. Yokohama breeze into a 3-goal lead inside 30 minutes, giving them an aggregate scoreline leading by 3-1. 5 minutes later, it's then 3-2 on aggregate as Ulsan grab one from a corner, and still before the half-time whistle comes a talking point. A break from an Ulsan player. One defender tracking back alongside the lone attacker. The defender is herring across to block the shot. The attacker drags the ball back and the defender sliding sees the ball cut back and it hits his outstretched arm as it glides over the rain-sodden pitch. By the letter of the law, it is a penalty. The defender couldn't do anything about it in the conditions and it's clever play by the attacker, but it is a penalty. But a straight red card for denying a goal-scoring opportunity? That is tough on Kamijima as he is sent off for Yokohama. They're down to 10 before half-time. Bojanovic makes it 3-2 and level on aggregate. It seems harsh and a double kick in the teeth for Yokohama, but laws are laws. Ulsan go on to dominate the rest of the game. They hit the Yokohama woodwork 3 more times before extra time and penalties ensue. The penalties went on all the way through. And I am perplexed when all of the players on the field had taken their penalties. Surely Ulsan, with 11 men on the field to play at the end, would now win. Yokohama had only 10, because a player had been sent off. The answer for this commentator, though, was no. They started going round again, until Yokohama actually prevailed. So, in a way, that means you're only penalised for a player being sent off in normal time and extra time, but not penalties. Seems Dutch to me, but hey-ho, it is done and dusted and I pack up. As the game had gone on longer than anticipated, it was only a brief chat with Brenners on the way out. Now it is off to my vehicle for the 10-mile cross-London journey, which will take at least an hour. Oh, and by the way, why do I still do it? Still not 100% sure, but I suppose I enjoy it. Typing away soothes the brain. Maybe it's cathartic, and maybe someone somewhere does enjoy it for some unknown reason. But why do it? I never really thought about it. I just do it.